Lady and gentlemen, tonight we step quietly through the paper lantern glow of old Edo into the hidden world where silk screens whisper secrets and the scent of incense drifts like a slow river. You've heard the tales geisha in painted white masks of courtesans wrapped in brocade and mystery, but tonight you'll hear the truths, the lies, and the strange places in between. And yes, some of those truths might surprise you, maybe even change the way you think about both.
Before we go further, if you're enjoying this quiet walk through Edo's moonlit streets, take a moment to tap that like button and subscribe. It's a small gesture, but it helps keep these stories alive and inspires me to bring you even more journeys into history's hidden corners. And while you're here, drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. You might just find someone else watching from the same city or halfway across the world under the same moon. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The air is cool against your cheek as you pass under the wooden gate. The lanterns above painted with curling characters you can almost read. Down a narrow street, laughter slides through the paper walls low, practiced, a melody crafted to make men feel like heroes. The shamasan's strings pluck a rhythm older than this alley, each note deliberate, each pause calculated. You imagine stepping into one of these tea houses, your feet leaving the dust of the outside world at the threshold. But here's the first reality check. Geisha are not courtesans. You might think you're crossing into a realm of hidden desires, but in truth, geisha are masters of conversation, music, dance, and refined company, not transactional lovers. Courtesans, or Oiran, on the other hand, walk with an entirely different set of rules, a different currency of exchange. Historians still argue whether the public truly understood the difference back then, or whether the allure of mystery blurred the lines on purpose. You glance up at the fluttering banners and wonder if the men stepping inside cared to know the truth or if they preferred the fantasy. A courtesan's world is a theater of power and negotiation, draped in silk and bound by etiquette that could snare even the boldest samurai. A geisha's world is subtler, a dance of wit and performance, where charm is the sword and laughter the shield. And yet, under the flicker of oil lamps, both could look almost the same to an untrained eye. You walk deeper into the night, the stone beneath your sandals cooling as the city exhales. Somewhere, a voice calls softly in the dark, and you realize that the line between myth and reality is not a wallet, a sliding paper door. And tonight, you have the key. The night deepens as you step from the lantern-lit street into a side alley where the sound of your own sandals seems too loud. Here, the walls lean closer, the air smells faintly of cedar, and the hum of the city fades into something more intimate. You feel as though you've crossed an invisible border not between neighborhoods, but between worlds. You pause outside a low doorway where a single lantern hangs, painted with the crest of the house. Inside, the light is golden and soft, spilling onto the threshold like warm honey. You bow your head and slip in, feeling the tatami beneath your bare feet. In the center of the room sits a woman in a deep indigo kimono, her hair sculpted into lacquered perfection, adorned with a single comb of carved ivory. She is not a courtesan. The shamisen in her lap tells you that much before she even speaks. She plucks a slow, deliberate note, her eyes lifting to yours, with the same precision as the music. You realize you are in the presence of a geisha woman trained for years, not in seduction, but in the fine arts of conversation, performance, and social navigation. It's a common myth that geisha are hidden lovers, but here the truth sits in front of you. She is an entertainer, not a bed. The courtesans of famed Oiran live in a different quarter entirely, their houses marked with bold banners and guarded by layers of ritual. While the geisha may share the same silks and the same poised smiles, the path they walk is carved by discipline, not dalliance. Historians still argue whether the boundaries between these worlds were always respected. Some records suggest the lines blurred in certain eras, especially when patrons with enough coin tried to test them. You think about that as the geisha pours you tea with a steady hand, her eyes never dropping, her conversation a web that holds you fast. Then, in your mind, you picture the courtesan stola wooden clogs, brighter robes, hair bristling with a dozen pins, each step a proclamation of status. Their art is in commanding the gaze and holding it until the price is named. Theirs is a performance of allure that carries a cost, often far beyond coin. The geisha, before you, smiles faintly at something you said, a small victory you barely register. And here's a truth the myths often forget. In this moment, she is the one in control. The room, the rhythm, the flow of talk-it, all bends toward her quiet mastery. From somewhere outside, the echo of geta clogs on stone signals the passing of an Oiran procession. You imagine the difference? The courtesans' parade is a storm of color and sound, while this tea house remains a calm pond, disturbed only by the soft pluck of strings. You sip your tea and think, maybe the myths survive because they're easier than the truth. Myths are simple, but here, under the hush of oil light, truth is layered, deliberate, and much harder to walk away from. You leave the tea house with the taste of roasted green tea still lingering on your tongue, the soft shamisen melody following you into the night like a ghost. You're not quite ready to forget. The street outside feels brighter somehow, louder, as if the city is eager to remind you it has many faces, not all of them serene. Just a few blocks away, the air thickens with the scent of incense and perfume, laced with the faint temps of sake. Paper lanterns, painted in vivid crimsons and golds, swing overhead, casting shifting shadows across the cobblestones. Here, the crowd moves slower, not because of the press of but because everyone turns their head in the same direction, the procession. Down the center of the street walks an Oiran, the highest-ranking courtesan, and she is a spectacle made flesh. Her robe, layered in silks of saffron and teal, trails behind her like a river, its embroidered cranes seeming to move as she does. Her hair is a fortress of pins, combs, and flowers, each glinting in the lantern light. Towering wooden geta clogs make her steps deliberate and slow, each one a calculated act of display. It's a scene that shatters another common myth, that courtesans were desperate to please. No, here, it is you who must work to earn their notice. The Oiran's gaze moves like a fan opening, selective and measured. Every detail is rehearsed, from the angle of her chin to the subtle turn of her wrist, as she acknowledges a familiar patron in the crowd. You remember what you've heard before a customer could even speak to her. They would have to prove themselves through gifts, introductions, and time. This was not a quick transaction. It was a negotiation wrapped in ritual, a ladder climbed rung by expensive rung. Historians still argue whether the Oiran's world was one of empowerment or entrapment. On one hand, their fame and wealth eclipsed that of many men. On the other, their lives were bound by rules as rigid as their ceremonial walks. The truth, like the embroidered cranes on her robe, shifts with the light. A boy standing beside you tugs on his mother's sleeve, asking if the woman is a geisha. The mother shakes her head without taking her eyes off the courtesan and whispers, "No." She walks higher. You can't help but smirk at the phrasing higher in status. Yes, but also literally higher in those impossible shoes. The procession passes, and the crowd flows back into the street's pulse. Somewhere behind you, a man mutters that he once spoke to an Oiran. You don't believe him. The way he says it sounds more like a prayer than a memory. You step aside to let the river of people carry on, and in that moment, you feel the weight of both worlds, the geisha's quiet mastery and the courtesan's blazing command balanced on opposite ends of the same cultural scale. One invites you in with grace, the other dares you to try and reach her. Both, in their own way, leave you chasing something just out of reach. The next evening, you find yourself back in the quieter quarter, drawn not by duty, but by curiosity, the sort that makes you linger in the doorway a little too long, watching the soft paper light spill out into the street. Inside, a group of Mako apprentice, Geisha, practicing their dance. You stand to the side, letting your eyes adjust to the soft glow of the oil lamps, the tatami mats breathing the faint scent of straw. A shamisen strings hum gently, and the room becomes a living watercolor swirls of patterned kimono, flashes of crimson lining, the measured tilt of a wrist holding a painted fan. The Mako's world looks delicate, but you can sense the steel thread running beneath it. Every movement is controlled, every glance calculated. This is not just art, it is discipline. And yet, discipline is a fragile thing in a city where temptation can seep through even the thickest shiji screens. Older geisha whispered of the invisible slope, a path where an artist's need for patronage can begin to blur into something less sanctioned. A wealthy merchant offers to pay for lessons, costumes, gifts, always without expectation. The expectations, of course, arrive later dripping, not as demands, but as invitations, gilded and impossible to ignore. For a Mako, the choices are never simple. The tea houses do not run on charm alone, they run on coin. A struggling season, a cancelled performance, or an injury can make a patron's offer feel less like danger and more like salvation. And yet the moment a geisha crosses that invisible line, she ceases to be what she was trained to be. The artistry becomes a prelude, not the performance itself. Historians still argue whether such crossings were rare exceptions or an unspoken, pragmatic undercurrent of Edo life. Some insist the geisha houses fiercely guarded their reputation, punishing even the rumor of impropriety. Others believe the lines between entertainer and courtesan were sometimes intentionally blurred for survival. The truth, you suspect, lived in the private negotiations, those whispered over tea, behind sliding doors, where no record could follow. Watching the Mako tonight, you see both futures in her steps, the pure arc of the geisha's art, and the glittering lure of the courtesan's stage. The music swells, her sleeves ripple like the wings of a crane, and for now she chooses grace. Outside, the street hums with another kind of music, coins clinking, sake pouring, the low laughter of men. You know that if she stepped through the wrong door, she might never come back the same way. And perhaps that is the truest temptation, not the fall itself, but the ease with which one could take that first step. You leave the Soufflet tea house of Gion behind you, the faint twang of a shamisen still trembling in the air, and step into a street that feels like another planet. One world fades like brushstroke ink in water, and another slams into you like a warm wave. This is Yoshiwara. Here, the night doesn't hum, it shouts. Lanterns burn red like ripe fruit ready to split, their light spilling across rain-dark cobblestones in thick, molten pools. The air swells with perfume, sake, grilled eel, and something else, something sweeter, heavier, almost dangerous. It wraps around you like an embrace you haven't earned yet. You glance up. Every window is alive. Courtesans, perched behind, wooden latticework, framed like living paintings, their kimonos screaming with color crimson, so deep it devours the candlelight. Teal shimmering like fish scales beneath ripples of gold thread. Each design is a story in silk. Phoenix, wings spread mid-flight. Peonies, so lush they almost breathe. Dragons caught in a forever curl of power. And the women inside, they don't hide. They lean forward, elbows resting lightly, lips curved in an invitation you swear is just for you, even though you know better. Here, there is no waiting for introductions, no slow dance of hidden meaning. Yoshiwara deals an A geisha might make you ache for something you can't touch. A courtesan makes you aware of every inch of your skin. The music here is not shamisen and soft drum, but laughter loud, sharp, sometimes cruel, mingled with the clink of sake cups and the rustle of silk that never quite stays in place. The street itself feels alive. Drunken merchants stagger with arms around each other, pockets lighter than they realize. Samurai stand like dark monoliths, their hands never far from their swords, even as they bargain for a night's company. Actors in garish makeup swagger past, trailing whispers and rumors. Somewhere, a dice game collapses into shouting. Somewhere else, a young man is pulled by the sleeve into a door he didn't mean to open. You walk slowly, as if caught in a current. The scents and sounds fold over each other. Grilled fish skin crackling over hot coals. A burst of perfume as a courtesan fans herself. The temps of fresh rain on the roof tiles. Every sense is full, almost too full. A voice cuts through it hollow, melodic, meant for you. You look up to find a pair of eyes through the lattice, black as lacquer and just as smooth. She tilts her head, letting the candlelight catch on the curve of her neck. No words follow, because they aren't needed. And yet, you remember where you just came from. In Gion, beauty was like a paper lantern in the wind, delicate, dancing, always just out of reach. It was about timing, about pauses, about the slow bloom of connection. You could leave a geisha's company without touching her, and feel as though you had been touched in some deeper, stranger way. But here, Yoshiwara offers no pauses. Its rhythm is urgent, its art a language of skin and scent and sound. The courtesans know exactly how to draw the eye, how to keep it, how to turn it into coin before the moon tilts past midnight. They are not just women. They are empires of themselves, ruling with painted lips and the curve of a shoulder, collecting tributes in gold and silk. You find yourself on a narrow stretch of street where the air feels almost electric. On your left, a tea house spills with the polite laughter of geisha, entertaining a few lingering patrons. On your right, the riot of Yoshiwara glows hotter, richer, as if the night itself is daring you to step forward. There's a tug-of-war happening in your chest. One pull leads you back to the quiet intoxication of art, the soft notes, the measured glances, the slow-burn elegance that leaves your heart in your throat. The other pull yanks you toward the fevered blazer, promise of touch, of release, of a story that will burn fast and bright, even if it leaves nothing but ash come dawn. A geisha might let you forget your body. A courtesan will make you remember it. A geisha will paint you into a dream you don't want to wake from. A courtesan will make you feel awake for the first time in months. And then it happens. Cross the street. A courtesan in a robe of stormy silver meets your gaze and smiles. At the same moment, from the tea house door behind you, a geisha steps out into the lamplight. Her face calm, her eyes unreadable. Both of them look at you, and for a heartbeat, the street is silent. It's not a choice of money. It's not even a choice of desire. It's a choice of what you want to remember when you wake tomorrow. The echo of a song you'll hum all your life, or the heat of a night you'll never quite be able to explain. You stand on that invisible border, one foot in the soft shadow of tradition, the other in the pulsing fire of the pleasure district, and you realize something. Once you choose, the other door may close forever. The tea house is quiet tonight, the paper walls glowing faintly in the lantern light. You sit cross-legged on a woven tatami mat, the scent of roasted green tea curling through the air. Across from you, a geisha tunes her shamisen, fingers moving with practiced elegance. Each note she plucks is clean, deliberate, like a raindrop falling into still water. This is a world for those who savor patience. The admirers of geisha are often men and women who find pleasure in the slow unveiling of charm. They are not here to conquer. They are here to be drawn in, to taste refinement as if it were rare. Sake poured one careful drop at a time. Every smile is a measured gift. Every flick of the wrist a brushstroke in a painting you'll never fully own. These patrons leave with the memory of poetry in motion, not the press of skin. For them, Art itself is the seduction. But beyond the tea house, down the narrow alley lit by oil lamps, another world breathes louder. The courtesan's chamber waits, with doors half open, letting the perfume spill into the street like a beckoning hand. Those who step inside are not seeking metaphor. They want the story to skip to its climax. They admire beauty, the way a fire admires kindling quickly, hungrily, without concern for what will be left when the flame dies. Here, the patrons are restless. They come with silver in their sleeves, and the certainty that pleasure is a commodity to be claimed, not courted. In their eyes, the courtesan is not a distant moon to be gazed at, but a blazing sun to be touched even. If it burns, they leave with the scent of skin on their clothes, the taste of wine still on their tongues, and the vague knowledge that the transaction is over. You can see the divide clearly now. Two audiences, two hungers. One seeks the intoxication of anticipation, the art of being held just out of reach, the satisfaction in never quite crossing the line. The other craves the immediacy of desire fulfilled, the heat of a body rather than the heat of a glance. And then comes the dangerous truth: both are valid. Both worlds offer their own kind of intoxication, and both exact a price. If you choose the geisha, you choose to live in the ache of what is suggested, knowing that beauty here is like moon. If you choose the courtesan, you take your pleasures quickly, burning bright and brief, knowing the candle will melt faster in your hands. Historians still argue whether Edo's society valued one more than the other, or whether the line between them was thinner than we imagine. In private, some men chased both, alternating between evenings of subtle conversation and nights of fierce abandon. Others pledged loyalty to one path, insisting the other could never satisfy them. Tonight, as you sip your tea, you realize the choice is yours, and perhaps, in the end, that choice says more about you than it does about either of them. You find yourself standing in the drizzle of an Edo night, the cobblestones slick under your geta. The air hums with two different melodies, one soft and deliberate, the other loud and unrestrained. To your left, a narrow lane curls into the Hanamachi, the Geisha district, where the faint strains of shamisen drift through the mist like the scent of plum blossoms. To your right, the main avenue glows with bold lantern light, the courtesans, where laughter bursts from behind beaded curtains and the perfume is thick enough to taste. Your hands rest inside your sleeves, fingers warming against your palms as if they know you're about to make a choice. Behind the paper walls to the left, a geisha might be serving tea at this very moment, her sleeves folded neatly, her gaze lowered just enough to make you lean forward to catch it. She will not touch you, at least not in the way flesh remembers, but she will lead you into a different kind of intoxication, the kind that coils slowly, like incense smoke in a dim room. You'll leave with your mind buzzing, your heart aching in a pleasant way, replaying every tilt of her head. To the right, the courtesan waits in a chamber, drenched in crimson and gold. Her smile is direct, her eyes fixed on yours, as though you are not just the only person in the room, but the only one in the world. Here, there is no coy hesitation, no half-veiled meanings. She invites you to step across the line instantly, and when you do, the world outside dissolves into nothing but the heat of breath and the rustle of silk pooling on the floor. You take a step forward and stop. You realize this is not merely a decision about where to spend the night. It's a declaration about the currency of your desire. Do you trade it for art, or for immediate? Do you gamble on the slow burn of anticipation, or the wildfire of fulfillment? Some say the man who chooses the geisha seeks something purer, untouched by the harsher light of reality. Others claim he's only fooling himself, that to pay for art is still to pay for a performance, one step removed from truth. And those who choose the courtesan, they're often labeled as shameless or bass, but in private, many would argue they are simply more honest about the hunger that drives them. Historians still argue whether the boundary between the two was a stone wall or a painted line, icily blurred. Some whisper of geisha who quietly crossed over for the right price, or courtesans who reinvented themselves as artists to escape the toll of their trade. It is said that in certain rare moments, the two worlds even collided, creating an enchantment neither side could fully claim. The rain deepens, droplets tapping your shoulders like impatient fingers. Somewhere, a shamisen note bends upward, and somewhere else, a curtain swishes open in welcome. You are standing exactly between grace and abandon, and perhaps, tonight, the greatest temptation is not choosing at all. You follow the trail of an old story, one whispered over cups of sake, until the lantern oil burns low. It tells of a merchant named Haruto Nita, too rich to squander coin without thought, nor too poor to ignore what he desired. One year, during the festival of the autumn moon, Haruto found himself caught between the same two paths you now face, the Hanamachi's quiet allure, and the courtesan's brazen glow. He chose to begin with the geisha. Inside the ochaya, the air was a careful tapestry of scents green teas, grassy warmth, faint camellia oil, and the clean musk of tatami straw. She arrived like a verse in a poem, sleeves whispering across the floor, hairpins catching the candlelight in fleeting sparks. Her voice was soft, but every word carried weight, like droplets on still water. They played a round of Kadi and sense, guessing, exchanged riddles wrapped in wordplay, and sipped sake from lacquer cups, so fine they seemed to float between their fingers. There was no rush in her world. The night was elastic, stretching time until he forgot the hour. When Haruto left, he felt sharp and polished, even as though her presence had burnished his spirit. But he also felt a hollow he could not name, the ache of something withheld. Days later, curiosity drew him to the courtesan's quarter. Here, there was no waiting. The door slid aside, and heat met him like a tide candle's burning low. Fabrics rich enough to drown in, a woman's gaze fixed on him without a flicker of doubt. She laughed freely, a sound like metal striking stone, and poured sake in quick, confident streams. Her touch was not delayed by games. Her words did not hide their meaning. He stepped into her chamber, and the world outside vanished in the rustle of silk and the taste of pomegranate on her lips. When he left, he was sated, his body loose, his breath slow, but the echo faded faster than he expected. By morning, the memory felt like fire gone cold. So what is the greater reward? The geisha offers you the long game, a night where every glance and pause builds a bridge you cross inch by inch, each step sweeter for the restraint. Yet her gift is intangible. Leave carrying an ember in your mind, not a mark on your skin. The courtesan offers immediacy, the clarity of hunger answered without delay, the honesty of desire made visible. But her gift burns fast, and you must return again and again to feel the heat. Historians still argue whether men like Haruto return to the geisha for the refinement, or to the courtesan for the truth. Some even whispered that the wisest alternated between both, polishing the spirit on one night, indulging the body on the next. And you stand where Haruto once stood, the two doors still before you. The choice is yours, the art of longing or the certainty of satisfaction. You walk deeper into the narrow streets of the Hanamachi, the glow of paper lanterns washing the cobblestones in warm gold. Tonight, the air feels heavier, as though the city itself knows two currents are about to collide. You've heard the warning before, never let the worlds of the geisha and the courtesan touch. Their realms are parallel rivers, beautiful yet dangerous if they merge. But some men, intoxicated by both, cannot help but stir the waters. One such man was Masanori, a samurai without a master, who wandered Edo with a purse full of coin and a hunger he could not name. He'd spent weeks wooing a geisha named Sayaka, savoring her wit and the way her shamisen seemed to echo his unspoken thoughts. Their nights were slow dances of conversation, where each silence meant more than words. Sayaka, reserved but attentive, had begun to reveal slivers of her guarded self, and Masanoriist, to the clang of swords and the bluntness of soldiers, found himself softened. But Masanori was also a creature of impulse. One rain-slick evening, after leaving Sayaka's ochaya, he wandered past the courtesan's district. There, In the shadows, a woman with garnet lips and eyes like sharpened lacquer beckoned him in. Her name was Akane. Her chamber was heat and perfume, her every movement a direct answer to desires he hadn't dared speak. That night, restraint was not invited. The problem began weeks later, when Sayaka learned of a Kannat, through gossip, but in the most dangerous way, seeing them together. It happened during the Plum Blossom Festival. Masanori, foolish in his overconfidence, escorted Akane through a market where Sayaka was performing a tea ceremony for the public. Their eyes met, and in that moment, the fragile balance between two worlds shattered. A geisha's weapon is subtle, but deadly. Sayaka did not scold or weep. She simply withdrew, her silences becoming colder than any insult. Invitations to Ochaya stopped arriving. Meanwhile, Akane, sensing a rival's shadow in his thoughts, became sharper, her generosity turning transactional. You see, the loss here was not merely the women, it was what they represented. From Sayaka Masanori, lost the slow cultivation of intimacy, the way a single smile could feel like a victory. From Akane, he lost the unfiltered rush of passion that had made the night feel infinite. He had reached for both worlds, but by doing so, he was left with neither. And this is the unseen danger. When you blend art and flesh, you risk tainting both. A geisha, once treated like a courtesan, may never look at you with that same layered gaze again. A courtesan, once suspecting you hunger for another's artistry, may never give herself with full abandon. Historians still argue whether men like Masanori were victims of their own greed or merely products of a time when temptation lined every street. But in the Hanamachi, the lesson is, clear choose your world, and honor it, for once the two collide, no lantern's light can untangle the shadows they leave behind. You linger in the thought, wondering why Edo so precise in its hierarchies, so meticulous in its rules would allow to such potent, seductive worlds to coexist. If the geisha embodied refinement, and the courtesan embodied desire, surely one would outshine the other. But Edo thrived not on simplicity, but on tension. The shogunate understood human nature in a way most rulers pretended not to. People, especially those with coin and influence, needed choices opposites to balance their appetites. Too much art, and the city would starve for passion. Too much passion, and it would collapse under its own indulgence. So, they kept the two fires burning side by side, close enough for the heat to mingle, but far enough to prevent a blaze. For the geisha, their role was a safeguard against chaos. They were the cultural memory of Edo keepers, of dance forms centuries old, of songs that carried echoes from distant provinces, of tea rituals that slowed time itself. Every performance was a reminder that beauty could be crafted, shaped, and preserved. When you sat across from a geisha, sipping tea as her sleeves brushed the tatami, you weren't buying her body, you were buying a story. For the courtesans, their existence was a release valve. The Yoshiwara district was the place where desires too wild for polite society could be played out. There was no pretense of restraint. Here, silk robes slipped from shoulders like water, and laughter was deep and unguarded. It was a place where power dynamics inverted, where even a merchant could feel like an emperor for a night. And yes, it was transactional, but that was its honesty. He pictured the two as rival houses on opposite banks of a river, each drawing different travelers. On one side, the house of the painted fan, where geisha led you through a maze of art, music, and wit until you forgot what time was. On the other, the house of scarlet veils, where courtesans took you by the hand and led you straight into the heart of heat. Some men never crossed the bridge between them. They chose, and in choosing, they kept their loyalty sharp. Others perhaps most wandered, testing each current until they found the one that carried them home. But the wisest knew the truth. The city needed both banks, and it was the river of longing between them that kept Edo's nights alive. Historians still argue whether this duality was a deliberate strategy by the shogunate to control its citizens, or a cultural accident born from centuries of evolving pleasure districts. Yet, as you walk the lantern-lit streets tonight, you can't help but feel it was intentional. After all, the human heart is easiest to govern when it is given to dreams to chase, and just enough distance between them to keep chasing both forever. It begins, as such tales often do, with the sound of shamisen strings in the night. You imagine yourself the Redo's narrow street lined with lanterns swaying in a restless breeze, the scent of grilled eel drifting over tiled rooftops, and the quiet rustle of silk as a geisha, named Ayaka, steps into the light. Ayaka was not the most famous geisha in her district, but she was the most dangerous in the way only quiet beauty can be. She had a gaze that lingered just long enough to make you believe she'd memorized your soul, and a laugh so rare it felt like a reward you could spend years earning. 4 months. She entertained the same client, a young samurai heir named Ren. His visits were always under the guise of cultural exchange, poetry readings, tea ceremonies. Yet, each evening stretched longer than the last, until the line between host and companion blurred in a way both knew could not be spoken aloud. But in Edo, whispers travel faster than wind. And one night, Ayaka learned that Renjiro had crossed the river to Yoshiwara, not just to any house, but to the Scarlet Veil, and to its reigning courtesan, Kiyomi. If Ayaka was moonlight, Kiyomi was fire. She was notorious for her scarlet lips, the artful disarray of her robe, and the unshakable skill of making every man feel as though he were the only one she had ever chosen. When Ayaka found him, leaving Kiyomi's courtesan loosened, the faintest smudge of rouge on his collar, her stillness became a blade. She did not scream. She simply bowed, as etiquette demanded, her smile painted on like the masks used in no plays. The courtesan, sensing the shift in air, descended the steps with a languid grace, her eyes locking on the geishas. The street seemed to still. Lantern flames trembled as if eavesdropping. This was not a meeting of professions, it was a clash of worlds. Ayaka's voice was soft, but each word struck like a drumbeat. You sell the body, I give the soul. Kiyomi's reply was a dagger wrapped in silk. Men do not come to Yoshiwara for souls. It should have ended their 2 women standing at the edge of their realms, separated by duty and desire. But Renjiro, in his foolish youth, tried to speak, to explain, to say that love had nothing to do with loyalty when temptation was so near. His words, meant to soothe, only deepened the cut. By morning, the story had seeped into every tea house and bathhouse of Edo. Patrons debated over seikops. Was Renjiro a traitor to art, or merely a man succumbing to the most human of hungers? Some took Ayaka's side, arguing that a geisha's love, once given, was a rare and sacred thing. Others sided with Kiyomi, claiming that passion without restraint was the truest form of living. Historians still argue whether Ayaka and Kiyomi ever met again, or if the shogunate quietly orchestrated their separation to keep peace in the pleasure quarters. But you can feel it, the invisible line they drew that night, a shimmering border where moonlight and fire almost touched. And somewhere, deep in the memory of Edo, the city still hums with the echo of that confrontation. You feel the air of Edo shift in the weeks after that night, as though the confrontation between Ayaka and Kiyomi had cracked something deeper than a single love affair. Whispers became arguments. Arguments became stories retold. Western ships had begun to anchor off distant coasts, their masts like forests of foreign wood. From them came goods, ideas, and a scent of something unsettling, a restlessness that could not be bound by the delicate threads of Edo's centuries-old customs. You notice it first in the fabrics. Foreign silks with patterns unlike any seen in Kyoto looms. Colors that didn't bow to the muted elegance of Japanese dye. Then in the music, strange brass instruments blaring alongside the shamisen during late-night revels in Yoshiwara. For the geisha, this creeping Western influence was a double-edged blade. On one side, it brought novelty a chance to weave foreign songs into performances. to surprise patrons, with dances flavored by distant shores. But on the other, it eroded the fine line that had always set them apart from the courtesans. The Westerners did not always care for the subtle art of conversation or the layers of unspoken tension. Kiyomi, ever the opportunist, adapted quickly. She began hosting themed evenings with French fans, lace accents at the edges of her robes, and even servings of imported liquor for her more adventurous patrons. The courtesan houses thrived on novelty, and in this age of shifting morals, novelty was gold. Men who once spent months courting the favor of a single geisha now grew impatient, lured by promises of instant gratification framed as exotic adventure. Ayaka felt it most keenly. Her art was in the pauses, the lingering glance over a teacup, the slow unfurling of trust over countless nights. But when her clients began comparing her to the new, hybrid entertainments of Yoshiwara, the invisible thread she wove between soul and performance seemed to fray. The West, one drunken merchant laughed to her face, doesn't wait for the moon to wax. Why should we? And so, the confrontation with Kiyomi became something larger than two women and a shared lover. It became a symbol of the old world clashing with the new. People took sides, not just based on personal taste, but on what kind of Edo they wished to live, in one that guarded the subtle art of geisha, or one that embraced the brazen heat of courtesans, reshaped by foreign glamour. Historians still argue whether the changes were inevitable or accelerated by these small, human dramas. You can almost see the balance tipping, the centuries-old etiquette trembling under the weight of imported fabrics, foreign melodies, and a new morality where desire was not something to be hidden behind folding screens, but displayed in the open like a silk fan. Ayaka would stand at her tea-house window in those days, watching the carriages roll past, their lacquered wheels spattered with the mud of change. Somewhere across the district, Kiyomi laughed with another client, her voice carrying over the rooftops like a challenge. And Edo, caught between moonlight and fire, began to wonder which would burn brighter in the years to come. You step into the grand hall and it feels like you've wandered into two worlds at once. One half is scented with incense, the lingering hum of shamisen strings, and the warm glow of paper lanterns falling over flowing silk kimonos. The other half is drenched in Western perfume, the crystalline clink of imported glassware, and the dazzling sparkle of French chandeliers. This is not the Edo of old, nor is it fully the Japan of tomorrow. It is the twilight space where past and modernity entwine like a dance that's both alluring and dangerous. Ayaka glides in from the corridor, regal, in a deep, indigo kimono, each step small and measured as if she's walking across the surface of a lake. She carries within her the refined spirit of centuries, artful pouring of sake, a smile that reveals just enough, a gaze that speaks yet keeps its distance. Across the room, Kiyomi enters, like a gust of foreign wind peristolered gown with white lace trim, a string of pearls gleaming at her throat. She laughs openly, offers red wine into a guest's hand, her fingers brushing his just so, her eyes lingering longer than propriety allows. The room becomes a silent battlefield. On one side, the disciplined elegance of the Geisha every movement, an art form honed over time. On the other, the bold radiance of the courtesan every gesture, an unhidden invitation. Western guests drift toward Kiyomi, intoxicated by her daring and novelty. Conservative Japanese patrons seek Ayaka, cherishing the subtle beauty they fear will vanish. But then, you realize something. Japan isn't standing still to choose. The government has opened its ports. Steamships dock daily. Goods and foreign ideals flow freely. Yet, alongside it all, tea ceremonies are still held. Kabuki still performed. The old geisha houses still open their doors. Edo is tailoring itself a new garment, Western fabric stitched with traditional thread. Music begins. The shamizan's twang mingles with the brassy call of a Western trumpet. At first, they clash then. Unexpectedly, they weave into a single, captivating tune. Heads turn. Ayaka and Kiyomi meet eyes, not with challenge this time, but with the faintest acknowledgement. Because perhaps both know, in a Japan on the move, no one truly wins or loses. Only those who adapt survive. And tonight, under the glow of lantern and crystal, between sake and red wine, between art and desire, Edo has written itself a brand new chapter. You walk the narrow lanes of Kyoto's Gion district on a spring evening, and the air hums with an almost impossible blend of old and new. Neon signs flicker over. Izakayas where businessmen unwind with beer, yet just a street away, wooden machiya townhouses stand with latticed windows, their warm paper lanterns swaying gently. From the corner of your eye, a silhouette moves small steps, immaculate kimono, hair adorned with seasonal kanzashi. For a moment, you wonder if time has slipped. She is a modern geisha still, trained in dance, music, and conversation, but she carries a smartphone in her sleeve. Her world is not the candlelit tea house of Edo's peak, but a curated blend for the 21st century, where tradition survives by learning to live beside Instagram and private VIP bookings. In Tokyo, far from Kyoto's quiet elegance, another kind of revival unfolds. In a cordoned-off corner of the city, Yoshiwara's streets are recreated not as the licensed quarter it once was, but as a tourist spectacle. Paper lanterns line the way. Courtesan processions parade in lavish brocade and towering hairpieces. The women walking in the distinctive, slow, high-stepping style called Soto Hakamanji. But there's no bargaining for favors here. Only flashes of cameras and souvenir stalls selling sweet dango and silk fans. It's performance now, not survival. The Courtesans, once dangerous allure, is repackaged into safe, ticketed events. Visitors lean in, hoping to taste a little of the past without its shadows, the political intrigues, the debts, the heartbreak. Yet, if you look closely in the eyes of the performers, there's still that glimmer, the same spark that once set Edo buzzing on festival nights. Japan has turned its living past into something you can walk through, photograph, and take home in a gift bag. Some say it's the price of preservation. Others call it the final act of transformation. But as the lanterns glow and the shamisen plays for a crowd that might never understand its lyrics, you realize something. The stage has changed. The actors have changed. The audience has changed. And yet, the story still walks these streets. You stand where two nights meet. The last hush of Gion on one side, the emptied avenues of a modern Yoshiwara. Reenactment on the other. The lanterns have burned low. The rain has finished its small sermon on the rooftops. You breathe in the mingled trace of sandalwood and storm. Incense and sky of fragrance you couldn't bottle if you tried, though some marketer will eventually slap a label on it and call it Twilight Kyoto. Guaranteed. The streets are slick. Black mirrors. Your footsteps sketch brief constellations in water, and then vanish. Behind a cedar lattice, a geisha finishes a final bow. Her sleeve falls just so. The cup is placed at a measured angle that says thank you, and also farewell. You watch a shadow cross a paper screen, the last silhouette of a dance that learned how to survive by changing its tempo rather than its steps. You know, if you return tomorrow, the art would still be their shamisen practice in the afternoon. Tea rehearsed until the silence between breaths feels like a line of poetry. Kanzashi matched to the season as faithfully as the moon. One ordinary fact you carry with you. Communities like Gion Kobu still train Mako and Gaiko today, with contracts, teachers, and houses that trace lineages like family trees. The world insisted on hurrying. They persisted in the logic of slow. Farther off, the replicate gate of Yoshiwara sleeps after its show. The great parade is over. No bargaining, no whispered negotiations. Only the clatter of costumes being carefully rehung and wigs set back on their quiet stands. The courtesan's strut is now choreography. The price of admission printed on a ticket instead of murmured by a manager. No one pretends it's the old quarter. Everyone pretends it's close enough. You smile, a little sadly, at the honesty of that arrangement. For once, spectacle doesn't lie about being spectacle. You tilt your head and listen. Somewhere a vending machine hums Edo, never saw that plot twist. But otherwise the city folds its noise and tucks it away. A delivery cyclist whistles. A cat decides. You are not important. A temple bell thinks about ringing and decides tomorrow is better. You are left with soft details. The paper taste of damp air. The faint salt at the corner of your lip. The way lamplight turns puddles into thin sheets of gold leaf. You remember jokes overheard tonight, someone calling umbrellas portable roofs for optimists. A drunk salaryman swearing he saw an Oiran make eye contact with him from 1865. She didn't. A tour guide explaining the Oiran walk, while her geta betrayed her with a squeak that sounded suspiciously like a rubber duck. Even history lets out a quiet laugh now and then. It's how it keeps breathing. And yet you also feel what doesn't joke. You feel the discipline that kept geisha art from dissolving in the rain of modernity. You feel the frankness of courtesan, pageantry transformed into pageantits. Heat cooled to memory, its danger restrained by daylight and museum glass. Historians still argue whether the geisha you meet today is a guardian of living tradition or a performer of curated nostalgia. You decide. The answer changes each time a hand places a teacup with reverence, and each time a visitor learns how to look instead of only to see. You walk a little, just to hear the pavement answer. If there was ever a border here, it has thinned to a thread art on one side. Former vice on the other yet. Both run on the same current. People gathering at night to feel more alive than daylight allows. The current is gentler now. The rules are kinder. The endings are less breakable. That is loss and mercy together. You accept both, because the city taught you how. You stop. Let the last scents collect temple ash, damp cedar, a whisper of perfume that lingers, like a note you don't want to leave unresolved. It is the final chord of the evening. You hold it until it stops vibrating in your chest. Then you let it go. You stand very still and let the street breathe for you flow. Slower out until the edges soften and the corners round. The rain has left a thin coolness in the air, and it wraps your wrists, your throat, the small spaces between your fingers. A lantern sighs. A curtain settles. A drop finds its way from eave to stone and breaks without a sound. You are safe here, in this almost silence, where the city folds its stories like quilts and lays them over sleeping rooms. Let your shoulders fall. Let your jaw grow light. Imagine the last incense coil unwinding in a patient line, each curl a step farther from hurry, each breath a lantern dimming with perfect timing. You walk once more in your mind along the Gion lane, passing the wooden doors that remember every hand. You cross, without effort, to the emptied parade route, where silk has gone quiet. Nothing asks anything of you now. You are simply allowed to be, the way a puddle is allowed to keep the moon for a little while. If a thought arrives, watch it like a traveler, at a station wave, and let it continue on. If a worry insists, place it on the shelf beside the folded fans, and say, kindly, tomorrow. The night understands. It has carried heavier burdens, and set them down gently. Here the smallest sounds grow friendly. The soft thread of distant tires on wet road. The hush of leaves, considering the breeze. The fabric of your sleeve finding a comfortable fold. When your eyes grow warm, let them close. The stories can wait. They have always been patient. You have walked far enough for one evening. Lanterns dim, rain settles into memory. The city promises to keep the rest. You believe it. You sleep.